Chapter 1. Blood in the Snow. The blizzard hit Everwood Ridge without warning, the kind of storm that swallowed highways whole and turned familiar roads into death traps. Sarah Winters gripped the steering wheel of her ancient Honda until her knuckles went white, cursing herself for thinking she could outrun both the weather and her past in a single desperate drive. She'd been running for 3 days since she'd walked out of her fiancé's penthouse apartment and discovered that the life she'd been building was constructed entirely of lies. 3 days since she'd learned that Marcus, charming, successful Marcus, had been using her as a cover for his embezzlement scheme. And now the FBI had questions she couldn't answer about money she'd never seen. The windshield wipers scraped uselessly against the ice. Visibility dropped to nothing. Sarah's phone had died an hour ago, and she hadn't seen another car since she'd turned onto this mountain road following a half-remembered childhood memory of her grandmother's cabin somewhere in these woods. Stupid, so incredibly stupid. The thought had barely formed when her headlights caught something in the road, a shape too large to be a deer, moving with a strange lurching gait. Sarah yanked the wheel right. The car hydroplaned on black ice, spinning in a sickening pirouette before slamming into a snowbank with a crunch of metal that made her teeth ache. The airbag deployed, punching the air from her lungs. For a moment, she just sat there, breath fogging in the sudden silence, waiting for her heart to remember how to beat normally. Alive. You're alive. She shoved the deflating airbag aside and tried her door. It wouldn't budge, wedged against a tree trunk. The passenger side was her only option. Sarah crawled across the console, forcing the door open against the wind's resistance, and half fell into the snow. The cold hit her like a physical blow. She was wearing designer boots meant for city sidewalks and a wool coat that might as well have been tissue paper against this kind of wind. Her suitcase was in the trunk, trapped behind crumpled metal. The shape she'd swerved to avoid lay 20 feet ahead, nearly buried in snow. Sarah's nursing instincts kicked in before her common sense could stop her. She stumbled forward, each step sinking deep, until she reached the figure and her breath caught. A wolf. Massive, with fur so dark it seemed to absorb the falling snow. Blood matted its side, stark red against black, and its breathing came in shallow, pained gasps. No, not a wolf. Too big. Wolves don't get this big. Its eyes opened, and they were wrong. Not the yellow or amber she'd expect, but a deep, startling gold that held far too much intelligence, too much awareness. Those eyes found hers, and something passed between them that made the hair on her arms stand up beneath her coat. Recognition. Impossible. Inexplicable recognition. "What are you?" she whispered. The creature made a sound, half whimper, half growl, and tried to stand. Its legs buckled. Sarah had spent 4 years in nursing school and another 3 working emergency room rotations in downtown Seattle. She triaged gunshot wounds, car accidents, and overdoses. She knew dying when she saw it, regardless of species. She also knew she was likely looking at her own death if she stayed out here much longer. The smart thing would be to get back in the car, huddle there until morning, pray someone found her. The smart thing would be to save herself. But she'd spent the last 3 years being smart, being careful, being exactly who Marcus wanted her to be. And look where that had gotten her. Sarah dropped to her knees beside the wolf. The snow soaked through her jeans immediately, cold enough to burn. She yanked off her scarf and pressed it against the worst of the bleeding. 3 parallel gashes that looked disturbingly like claw marks. "Easy," she murmured, using the same steady tone she'd use with any patient. "I've got you. Just stay still." The wolf's eyes never left her face. Up close, she could see they weren't simply gold. They held flecks of amber and bronze, and they watched her with an intensity that should have terrified her. It should have terrified her that her hands were buried in the fur of a predator that could kill her with one bite. It should have terrified her that she was stranded on a mountain in a blizzard, miles from help, with a dying animal and a wrecked car. But all she felt was a strange, bone-deep certainty that this moment mattered, that this choice, to stay, to help, to touch this creature that looked at her like it knew her, was the first real choice she'd made in years. "You're not going to die out here," she told the wolf firmly. "And neither am I," Do you understand? We're both going to survive this." The wolf made that sound again, softer this time. If she didn't know better, she'd swear it was trying to answer. The wind howled, and Sera realized with a sick lurch that she couldn't feel her fingers anymore. The adrenaline was wearing off, and with it, the momentary shield against the cold. She looked back at her car, dark and silent as a tomb, then at the wall of trees surrounding the road. Grandmother's cabin. It has to be nearby. She said it was 3 miles past the fork in the road, but which direction? And could she carry an injured wolf, if that's even what it was, through deep snow while freezing to death herself? The wolf shifted, and suddenly it was pushing at her with its massive head, nudging her with surprising gentleness toward the tree line. "Away from the road. Away from the car. You want me to follow you?" The words sounded insane even as she spoke them. Those gold eyes held hers. Steady. Certain. "Trust me." She could have sworn she heard the words, though the wolf's jaws never moved. Sera pulled her coat tighter and made the second choice that would change her life forever. "Okay," she breathed. "Lead the way." The wolf staggered to its feet, visibly trembling with the effort, and limped toward the trees. Sera wrapped her arm around its shoulders, or tried to, given its size, and together they stepped off the road and into the dark forest, leaving her old life buried in snow behind them. Neither of them saw the second set of eyes watching from the shadows, or the way those eyes narrowed with recognition and rage. The hunt had only just begun. Chapter 2. Sanctuary in Shadow. The forest swallowed them whole. Sera had never experienced darkness like this, thick and absolute, broken only by the wolf's dark shape moving ahead of her like a ghost. The wind screamed through the trees, and with each step, the cold worked its way deeper into her bones. Her feet had gone numb 10 minutes ago. She couldn't feel her face. This is how people die, she thought distantly. This is exactly how it happens. But the wolf kept moving, glancing back every few steps to make sure she followed. And something about those gold eyes kept her legs moving, even when her body begged to stop. Even when the sensible thing would be to curl up under a tree and wait for hypothermia to feel like falling asleep. She'd read about that once. How freezing to death felt peaceful at the end. Warm, even. The wolf made a sharp sound, almost like a bark, and she realized she'd stopped walking, her mind wandering into dangerous territory. "I'm coming," she mumbled through numb lips. I'm okay." The creature limped back to her, pressing its massive body against her legs. The heat radiating from it was shocking, feverish. Sera leaned into that warmth without thinking, her hand tangling in the thick fur at its neck. So warm. How is it so warm? The wolf pushed forward, practically dragging her now, and Sera stumbled along in a half-dream state, where the only real things were the animal's heat, the crunch of snow, and the wind's endless howl. She didn't know how long they walked. Time lost meaning in the dark and cold. Then suddenly, impossibly, there was light ahead. Faint and golden, flickering between the trees. "I'm hallucinating," Sera whispered. "That's not real." But the wolf pulled her toward it with renewed urgency, and as they broke through the last line of trees, Sera saw a cabin. Small, maybe 3 rooms at most, with smoke curling from a stone chimney and warm light spilling from frost-covered windows. Grandmother's cabin. She recognized it from faded photographs, though it had been maintained far better than she'd expected for a place that supposedly sat empty for years. The wolf collapsed on the porch steps. Adrenaline flooded Sera's system, momentarily overriding the hypothermia's grip. She tried the door, unlocked, and shoved it open with her shoulder. Heat rushed out like a physical embrace, and she nearly sobbed with relief. "Okay, come on." She bent down, hooking her arms under the wolf's front legs. "Just a little further, please." The animal was easily twice her weight, maybe more, but somehow they made it over the threshold together. Sera kicked the door shut behind them and immediately collapsed beside the wolf on a worn rug in front of a still-burning fireplace. Someone's been here. Recently. The thought should have worried her, but she was too cold, too exhausted. She'd deal with whoever owned this place when they showed up to kill her or call the cops or whatever. Right now, she needed to not die. And she needed to help the wolf. Sera forced herself to move, adding wood to the fire with shaking hands, before turning her attention to her unlikely companion. In the firelight, the creature was even more magnificent, and more terrifying. Its head would easily reach her chest if it stood, and its paws were the size of her hands. The dark fur was matted with blood and snow, and those 3 parallel gashes across its ribs looked even worse now. "Okay," she said, more to herself than the wolf. "Okay, I can do this." The cabin's kitchen yielded clean towels, a first aid kit that looked surprisingly well stocked, and a pot she could use to heat water from the tap, which miraculously worked. She had no idea how this place had running water and electricity when it sat miles from civilization, but she wasn't going to question miracles tonight. When she returned to the wolf with warm water and supplies, those gold eyes were watching her again, alert, aware. "This is going to hurt," she warned softly, kneeling beside it. "But if I don't clean these wounds, infection will kill you just as surely as blood loss." The wolf huffed, an eerily human sound of acknowledgement, and laid its head down on its massive paws. Sera worked carefully, cleaning away blood and debris, trying not to think about the fact that she was treating an apex predator that could tear her throat out in half a second. The wolf remained perfectly still, though she felt the muscles beneath its fur tense with pain. "You're being so good," she murmured, falling into the same soothing rhythm she used with patience. "So brave. Almost done, I promise." As she worked, exhaustion and adrenaline made her chatty in a way she'd never normally be. "I don't suppose you know anything about embezzlement? No? Lucky you," she laughed, a slightly unhinged sound. "I was engaged. Did I mention that? To a man who apparently thought my nursing schedule made me the perfect accomplice for financial fraud. The FBI has some questions about offshore accounts I've never heard of, and honestly, running seemed like the best option." The wolf made a low sound in its chest. Not quite a growl, more like, "Sympathy? You're a good listener." Sera applied antibiotic ointment with gentle fingers, better than my ex-best friend, who told me I should have paid more attention to Marcus's business dealings. As if I should have suspected the man I loved was a criminal, as if that's a reasonable thing to expect. Her hands stilled. I'm a terrible judge of character, apparently. Which makes what I'm about to say even more insane, but I don't think you're going to hurt me. I should be terrified. You could kill me so easily, but I look at you and I feel safe. Isn't that the most ridiculous thing you've ever heard? The wolf lifted its head and did something that stopped Sera's heart. It rested its muzzle gently against her cheek. The gesture was so deliberate, so tender, that tears suddenly burned behind Sera's eyes. She hadn't cried when she'd discovered Marcus's betrayal. She hadn't cried when the FBI agent had shown her financial records with her forged signature. She hadn't even cried when she'd wrecked her car and nearly died in the snow. But this impossible moment of connection with a creature that shouldn't exist broke something, open inside her chest. "Thank you," she whispered, pressing her forehead against the wolf's. "For leading me here, for saving my life." The wolf's eyes drifted closed, and its breathing deepened into sleep. Sera finished bandaging its wounds, then grabbed blankets from what looked like the bedroom and made a nest beside the fireplace. The wolf was too heavy to move, and frankly, she didn't want to. She curled up against its side, stealing its body heat, and let the fire's warmth finally thaw her frozen limbs. Just before sleep claimed her, Sera could have sworn she felt the wolf shift closer, curving its body protectively around hers, and in the last edges of consciousness, she heard something that couldn't be real. "Sleep, little one. You're safe now." The voice was deep, male, and entirely in her mind. Sera told herself it was a dream as she surrendered to exhaustion, wrapped in warmth and fur and the strange certainty that her entire world had just shifted on its axis. Outside, the blizzard raged, and in the shadows at the tree line, something watched the cabin with hungry eyes, waiting for dawn. Chapter 3. The stranger in her sanctuary. Sera woke to silence. Not the peaceful quiet of a lazy morning, but the heavy, watchful stillness that made prey animals freeze in place. Her eyes snapped open, and for a disorienting moment, she couldn't remember where she was. Then it came back in a rush, the blizzard. The crash, the wolf that was no longer beside her. Sera sat up, her heart hammering. The blankets she'd pulled over them both lay in a tangled heap, and the bandages she'd carefully applied were scattered across the floor. Strips of white gauze stained with dried blood. But no wolf. "Hello?" Her voice cracked. She cleared her throat and tried again. Are you here?" Movement from the kitchen made her spin around. A man stood with his back to her, silhouetted against the weak morning light filtering through the window. Tall, well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders and dark hair that fell just past his collar. He wore jeans that hung low on his hips and nothing else, and even from across the room, Sera could see the bandages wrapped around his ribs, the same placement as the wolf's wounds. "No, that's impossible. You should still be asleep." His voice was deep, rough like he hadn't used it in days, and achingly familiar. The same voice that had whispered in her mind before she'd lost consciousness. "You were hypothermic. Your body needs rest." He still hadn't turned around. Sera's nursing training warred with her survival instincts. She should run. She should grab something, anything to use as a weapon. She was alone in a cabin in the middle of nowhere with a strange man who had somehow, impossibly, taken the place of a wolf. Instead, she heard herself say, "You're bleeding through your bandages." His shoulders tensed. "It will heal. Not if it gets infected." She stood on shaking legs, pulling one of the blankets around herself like armor. "Let me look at it. You should be afraid of me." "I know." Sera took a step closer. "I should have been afraid of you last night, too. Should have left you in the snow. Should have saved myself instead of a dying wolf that was probably going to eat me the moment it felt better." Finally, he turned. Sera's breath caught. He was beautiful in a way that didn't seem quite human. All sharp angles and masculine grace, with a face that looked carved from stone, and those same impossible gold eyes that had watched her with such intelligence in the dark. A rough stubble covered his jaw, and 3 parallel scars ran down his left shoulder, old and silvered with time. Claw marks, just like the fresh wounds she'd bandaged. "I would never hurt you." The words came out fierce, almost angry. "I would die before I let anything harm you." We just met. But even as she said it, Sera knew it wasn't quite true. That moment on the road, when their eyes had first locked, that hadn't felt like a first meeting. It had felt like recognition, like coming home, did we? He took a step toward her, then stopped himself, jaw clenching. "You felt it too. Last night. The pull." Sera wanted to deny it, wanted to laugh it off as hypothermia-induced delusion or shock, or any of the dozen rational explanations a woman with a nursing degree could conjure. But she'd spent 3 years lying, to herself, to others, about her relationship with Marcus. She was done with lies. "Yes," she whispered. "I felt it." Something in his expression cracked. Relief and anguish mixed together. "My name is Kade Blackthorn, and I owe you my life, Sera Winters." She managed a weak smile, and I'm pretty sure we're even on the life-saving front. "This cabin..." He gestured around them. "It belongs to my pack. We maintain several safe houses throughout the territory. I came here to hide. From whoever gave you those wounds." His jaw tightened. "From my brother. He challenged me for the alpha position. I won, but..." He touched the bandages carefully. "Magnus doesn't accept defeat. He had others attack me while I was in wolf form, away from the pack. They used silver. The word meant nothing to Sera, but the way he said it, with such venom, told her everything she needed to know. So you're what, exactly?" She kept her voice steady, clinical. "A werewolf? A shapeshifter?" "Both." "Neither." Kade ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident in every line of his body. "We call ourselves the Changed. We're born this way, not made. It's in our blood, our bones. We're human and wolf, and we've existed in the shadows of your world for thousands of years." He watched her carefully, waiting for the fear, the revulsion, the inevitable horror. Sera surprised them both by laughing. A sharp, slightly hysterical sound, of course, Of course this is my life now. Run from one impossible situation straight into another. She pressed her hands against her face. My ex-fiancé is an embezzling criminal. The FBI thinks I'm his accomplice. I totaled my car in a blizzard. And now I'm having a casual conversation with a werewolf about pack politics. This is fine. Everything is fine. Sera... No, really, this makes perfect sense. She was spiraling and she knew it, but she couldn't stop. I should have known something was off when a giant wolf with human eyes led me to a mysteriously well-maintained cabin with electricity and running water in the middle of a snowstorm. That's totally normal. Nothing weird about that at all. Kade crossed the distance between them in 2 long strides and caught her hands in his. His palms were warm, calloused, and the moment his skin touched hers, that pull she'd felt last night surged back twice as strong. Her breath hitched. Listen to me. His voice dropped low, intense. I know this is overwhelming. I know you have every reason to run screaming, but you're here, in my territory, and my brother knows it. The moment this storm clears, he'll come for me, and he'll see you as either a weakness to exploit or a threat to eliminate. Fear, cold and sharp, cut through Sera's hysteria. What are you saying? I'm saying you can't leave, not yet. Not until I can guarantee your safety. His thumbs brushed across her knuckles, a gesture so gentle it made her chest ache. I brought you into this world. I put you in danger just by letting you help me, and I will do whatever it takes to protect you. You don't even know me. Those gold eyes held hers, burning with an intensity that made her feel stripped bare. I know enough. I know you risked your life for a dying animal in a blizzard. I know you're running from someone who betrayed your trust. I know you're stronger than you think you are. He paused, and something vulnerable flickered across his face. And I know that when I'm near you, the wolf inside me, the predator that should see you as either prey or threat, feels calm for the first time in years. Sera's heart thundered in her chest. This was insane, all of it. She should demand he take her to the nearest town the moment the storm cleared. Should put as much distance between herself and this dangerous, impossible man as humanly possible. Instead, she heard herself ask, "How long until your brother comes?" Kade's expression darkened. "A day, maybe 2 if the storm bought us time." "Then you'd better tell me everything," Sera said, surprised by the steadiness in her own voice. "Because if I'm going to survive in a world with werewolves and pack politics, I need to know the rules." Something that might have been admiration flickered in Kade's eyes. "You're not going to run. Where would I go?" She smiled sadly. "Besides, you said it yourself. We're even now. You saved my life, I saved yours. Maybe we save each other a little longer." Kade's grip on her hands tightened just slightly. "There's something else you need to know. About why you feel this pull between us. What is it?" He looked at her like she was both his salvation and his doom. The changed have something we call a mate bond. It's rare, most of us never find it. But when we do, it's absolute. Soul to soul, life to life. His voice dropped to barely a whisper. "Sera, you're my mate, and that makes you the most dangerous thing in my world." The words hung in the air between them. Heavy with meaning Sera didn't fully understand but felt in every cell of her body. Outside, a wolf howled in the distance. The hunt was getting closer. Chapter 4. Lessons in Blood and Belonging. The mate bond. The words echoed in Sera's mind as she watched Kade move around the cabin with predatory grace, gathering supplies. Weapons, she realized with a jolt. Silver daggers, a compound bow, items that looked disturbingly lethal. "You keep saying I'm your mate," she said finally, breaking the tense silence. "But you haven't explained what that actually means." Kade paused, a blade in his hand catching the morning light. "It means everything." He set the weapon down carefully before turning to face her. "The mate bond is sacred among the changed. It's not something we choose, it chooses us. When a shifter finds their true mate, it's like 2 halves of the same soul recognizing each other." Sera wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the fire. "That's not possible. You can't just look at someone and know, can I?" He moved closer, stopping just outside her personal space. Close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his skin, see the flecks of amber in those impossible gold eyes. Tell me you don't feel it, Sera. Tell me that when I touch you, your entire body doesn't come alive. That when we're near each other, something inside you doesn't whisper mine. She wanted to deny it. Every rational part of her brain screamed that this was insanity, Stockholm Syndrome, or trauma bonding, or any of the psychological explanations that made sense. But she'd felt his absence the moment she'd woken alone, had felt relief crash through her when she'd seen him standing in the kitchen. And when he'd taken her hands, it had felt like something fundamental clicking into place. "This is crazy," she whispered. "I know." His voice softened. "And I know you have no reason to trust this, to trust me. You were betrayed by someone you loved, someone who should have protected you. Marcus never protected me." The admission came out bitter. He used me, used my trust, my routine, my career as a shield for his crimes. I was so busy being the perfect girlfriend, so focused on becoming the perfect wife, that I never saw what was right in front of me. Kade's jaw clenched. "If I ever meet this Marcus, I'll tear his throat out." The casual violence in his tone should have frightened her. Instead, some dark part of Sera felt a surge of savage satisfaction. "Get in line behind the FBI," she said dryly. That startled a laugh from him. Low and rough, like he didn't do it often. The sound did dangerous things to her pulse. "Come here." He gestured to the kitchen table where he'd laid out a map. "If you're staying, you need to understand the territory." Sera joined him, acutely aware of the bare inches between their bodies as they leaned over the map. The paper was worn, marked with colored pencil annotations and handwritten notes. "This is Everwood Ridge." Kade's finger traced the mountain range. "My pack, the Blackthorn pack, controls everything from here to the northern border. We're one of the oldest bloodlines in North America. 300 strong, give or take. 300 werewolves." Sera tried to wrap her mind around it. "Living here, among humans. We've always lived among humans. We're not so different. We love, we grieve, we protect our own. We just have sharper teeth." His expression darkened. "But we also have our monsters. My brother Magnus is one of them." "Tell me about him." Kade was silent for a long moment, his hand braced on the table. "Magnus and I are twins, born 3 minutes apart. But those 3 minutes meant everything. The firstborn becomes alpha. It's tradition, law, fate. He never forgave me for being born first. So he challenged you. He challenged me because he's always believed he deserved it more. Maybe he's right." The words came out hollow. "Maybe I'm not strong enough. I certainly wasn't strong enough to see the betrayal coming until his allies had silver weapons at my throat." Sera's hand found his before she could think better of it. "You survived. That takes strength." His eyes snapped to hers, burning with sudden intensity. "I survived because I ran. Because I fled from my own pack rather than fight. What kind of alpha does that make me?" "The kind who lives to fight another day." She squeezed his hand. "The kind who's smart enough to know the difference between strategy and surrender." Something shifted in his expression, vulnerability mixing with wonder. "How do you do that?" "Do what?" "Make me feel less alone." His free hand came up, fingers ghosting along her jaw so lightly it might have been imagination. "I've spent my entire life surrounded by pack, by family, and I've never felt anything but isolated. Like I was playing a role everyone expected but no one truly saw me. Then you stumbled into my territory in the middle of a storm, bleeding determination and stubborn courage, and suddenly—" He trailed off, but Sera understood. She felt it too, the recognition, the rightness, the terrifying sense that this stranger knew her better than people she'd known for years. "Suddenly, you're not alone anymore," she finished, softly. "Neither are you." The moment stretched between them, fragile and electric. Kade's thumb brushed her cheekbone, and Sera's breath hitched. She could see the war in his eyes, desire and restraint, need and nobility. "I should warn you," he said, voice rough. "The mate bond will get stronger, more intense. It's already overwhelming, I know, but it will become nearly impossible to resist. The wolf in me wants to claim you, mark you, make absolutely certain that everyone knows you're mine." Heat flooded through Sera at his words, primal and undeniable. "And the man in you? Wants to give you time, wants you to choose this freely, not because some ancient magic decided we belong together." His hand dropped away, and the loss of contact was almost painful. You deserve better than being thrust into a world of violence and politics and danger. You deserve the life you were building. That life was a lie, Sera said firmly. Maybe this is insane. Maybe in a week I'll wake up and realize I've lost my mind. But right now, this, whatever this is between us, feels more real than anything I've had in years. Before Kade could respond, a sound cut through the morning, a long, mournful howl that raised every hair on Sera's arms. Kade's entire body went rigid. He's here. Magnus? His scouts. Kade moved to the window, peering out through a gap in the curtains. They're testing the perimeter, looking for weaknesses. We have maybe an hour before they close in. Fear spiked through Sera's chest. What do we do? Kade turned back to her, and in that moment, he looked every inch the alpha, powerful, commanding, dangerous. We fight. But first, I need you to understand something crucial about the mate bond. What? If they hurt you, if they so much as threaten you, the wolf will take over. I won't be able to control it. The need to protect you will override everything else. Strategy, reason, even self-preservation. His eyes held hers, fierce and unwavering. So you need to promise me something. Anything. If it comes down to a choice between saving me or saving yourself, you run. You get as far from here as possible and you don't look back. Sera lifted her chin, meeting his intensity with her own. No, Sera, I didn't drag you through a blizzard and patch you up just to abandon you now. If we're doing this, if we're really mates or whatever, then we do it together. We fight together, we survive together, or we go down together. For a moment, Kade just stared at her. Then he crossed the distance between them in 2 strides and pulled her into his arms. The embrace was fierce, desperate, and Sera melted into it, her hands fisting in his shirt as she breathed, in his scent, pine and smoke, and something wild she couldn't name. You're going to be the death of me, he murmured, against her hair. Or your salvation, she countered. Another howl echoed through the forest, closer this time. Multiple voices joined it, a chorus of predators closing in on their prey. Kade pulled back just enough to meet her eyes. Then let's make sure it's the latter. Stay close to me. Do exactly as I say. And Sera? Yes? When this is over, we're having a very long conversation about the complete lack of self-preservation instincts you seem to possess. Despite everything, the danger, the fear, the impossible situation, Sera found herself smiling. Deal. Outside, the hunting calls grew louder. The storm was over, but the real battle was just beginning. Chapter 5. When wolves circle Kade moved with purpose, pulling weapons from hidden compartments Sera hadn't noticed. A shotgun loaded with what he called silver shot, more blades, even a crossbow that looked like it belonged in a medieval armory. How many are out there? Sera asked, trying to keep the tremor from her voice. 4, maybe 5. Kade loaded the shotgun with practiced efficiency. Magnus won't come himself, not yet. He'll send his most loyal. Wolves who want to see me dead almost as much as he does. Why do they hate you? Because I represent the old ways. Tradition. Honor. He checked the sight on the crossbow. Magnus wants to modernize. Expand our territory. Make alliances with packs that don't share our values. He thinks I'm weak for maintaining the treaties our father established. Are you? Sera surprised herself with the directness of the question. Kade's lips quirked. Careful, little mate. Your courage is showing. I'm serious. If you're going to protect me, I need to know what we're up against. Is your brother stronger than you? He set down the crossbow and turned to face her fully. In raw power, we're evenly matched, but Magnus has always been more ruthless. He'll do whatever it takes to win. Cheat, manipulate, sacrifice his own pack members if necessary. I won't, and he sees that as weakness. It's not weakness. Sera stepped closer, driven by an instinct she didn't fully understand. It's what makes you the better alpha. Anyone can rule through fear. It takes real strength to lead with honor. Something fierce and possessive flared in Kade's eyes. How is it possible that you understand me better in 2 days than my own pack has in 30 years? Maybe they've never really looked at you, just at the title. She reached out, her fingers brushing the silver scars on his shoulder. These are old, from before Magnus's challenge. A hunting accident when we were teenagers. Or that's what everyone believed. Kade's jaw tightened. Magnus has been trying to eliminate me since we were 16. The only difference now is that he's stopped pretending it's anything else. The howls came again, closer now, circling. Sera could see movement between the trees through the window, dark shapes darting through the snow. "They're hurting us," Kade muttered, trying to drive us out into the open. "So we stay inside. They'll smoke us out or wait until we starve. We can't—" He stopped abruptly, his head tilting in a way that was pure predator. "Wait, there's only 3 now. What happened to the others? Either splitting up to flank us or—" His eyes widened. "Get away from the windows!" He grabbed Sera and pulled her down just as the front window exploded inward in a shower of glass and wood. A massive wolf, gray and scarred, easily as large as Kade had been, crashed through, landing in a crouch among the debris, its lips pulled back, revealing teeth designed to tear flesh from bone. Sera scrambled backward, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might burst. This wasn't like Kade. There was no intelligence in those yellow eyes, no recognition. Just hunger and violence. Marcus Graythorn. Kade positioned himself between Sera and the intruder, his voice dropping to a growl that raised the hair on her arms. "You always were Magnus's loyal dog," the wolf snarled, muscles bunching for a leap. "Don't shift," Marcus's voice came from outside, human, mocking. 2 more wolves emerged from the tree line, flanking the cabin. Let's see how the mighty alpha fights when he can't use his claws. It was a trap. If Kade shifted, he'd be vulnerable. His wounds hadn't fully healed, and the transformation would tear them open again. But in human form against a wolf, he was at a severe disadvantage. "Run," Kade said softly to Sera. "Out the back. There's a trail." "No, Sera, this isn't negotiable." The gray wolf lunged. Kade met it head-on, catching it mid-leap with strength that should have been impossible for a human. They went down in a tangle of limbs and fur. Kade's hands locked around the creature's throat as it snapped inches from his face. Sera didn't think. She grabbed the nearest weapon, one of the silver daggers, and threw herself forward. The shoulder joint. Kade shouted, straining to keep the massive jaws away from his throat. Sera drove the blade home. The wolf shrieked, a sound of pure agony, and thrashed backward, silver burning through its system like acid. It shifted mid-convulsion, becoming a man clutching his shoulder and gasping in pain. "You bitch!" he spat at Sera. "You fucking—" The door burst open. 2 more wolves poured in, and this time Kade didn't hesitate. His form blurred, bones cracking and reshaping in a transformation that was both beautiful and horrifying. In seconds, the man was gone, and the massive black wolf from the forest stood in his place, but Sera could see the blood, so much blood, seeping through his dark fur where the bandages had been. The cabin exploded into violence. Kade threw himself at the first attacker with a ferocity that took Sera's breath away. They collided with bone-rattling force, teeth and claws flashing. The second wolf tried to circle around, going for Sera, but Kade was faster. He caught it by the throat and slammed it into the wall hard enough to crack timber. Protect her. Must protect her. The thought blazed through Sera's mind in Kade's voice, and she realized with shock that she could feel him, feel his pain, his rage, his desperate need to keep her safe. The mate bond was opening, pulling her into his consciousness. The injured shifter on the floor lunged for Sera, human hands reaching for her throat. She didn't freeze this time. She grabbed the shotgun Kade had abandoned and swung it like a bat, catching him across the temple. He went down hard. "Sera!" Kade's mental voice was strained. "The silver rounds, load them." Her hands shook as she fumbled with the shells, but muscle memory from a summer spent at her uncle's hunting cabin kicked in. She loaded and cocked the weapon just as the largest wolf, the one from outside, Marcus, came through the broken window. He was heading straight for Kade, whose attention was divided between the 2 attackers already on him. Sera didn't aim for the wolf. She aimed for the ground in front of it and pulled the trigger. The silver shot exploded in a spray of pellets. Marcus yelped and skidded sideways, several pieces embedding in his shoulder and leg. The distraction was enough. Kade threw off his attackers and positioned himself squarely between Sera and all three wolves. His growl was low and continuous, a warning that made the air vibrate. One of the wolves whimpered and backed toward the door. "Enough!" A new voice cut through the chaos. "Stand down, all of you." A man stepped through the broken doorway, and Sera's breath caught. He looked almost exactly like Kade, the same sharp features, the same build. But where Cade's eyes were gold, this man's were ice blue. And where Kade radiated protective strength, this man exuded cold calculation. Magnus Blackthorn had arrived. "Hello, brother." Magnus smiled, and it was the smile of a shark. "I see you found yourself a pet. How domesticated of you." Kade shifted back to human form, rising to his full height, despite the blood streaming down his side. When he spoke, his voice was pure alpha command. "Leave, now. Before this becomes a war, you can't win, can't I?" Magnus's gaze slid to Sera, and she felt the weight of his attention like ice water down her spine. "Tell me, brother, what would you give to keep your little human safe? Your title? Your pack? Your life?" The question hung in the air, like a blade, and Sera realized with dawning horror that she'd just become the ultimate weapon in a war between brothers, one that would end with either Cade's surrender or his death. Cade's hand found hers, squeezing once. Through the mate bond, she felt his determination, his love, his absolute refusal to let her be used. "I'll give you nothing," Kade said quietly, "but I'll take everything if you threaten what's mine." Magnus's smile widened. "We'll see about that." He whistled sharply, and his wolves limped out after him, leaving destruction and blood in their wake. At the door, Magnus paused. "You have until the full moon, Kade. 3 nights. Challenge me properly, under pack law, or I'll assume the title by default. And your little human?" He glanced back at Sera. "She'll make a lovely trophy either way." Then he was gone, melting into the forest with his wounded soldiers. The silence that followed was deafening. Sera looked at Kade, really looked at him. Blood covered his torso, his legs were shaking, and his face was pale with pain and exhaustion. But his eyes, those impossible gold eyes, held nothing but fierce determination. 3 nights, she whispered. "That's not enough time for you to heal." "I know." He swayed slightly and she rushed to support him. "But I don't have a choice. If I don't fight him under the full moon, he becomes alpha by forfeit, and then nothing will stop him from taking you. Then we run. Leave the territory, go somewhere he can't find us. Sera." He cupped her face with a blood-stained hand. "I'm the alpha. If I run again, I'm not just abandoning my title. I'm abandoning 300 wolves who depend on me. Children, families, good people who will suffer under Magnus's rule." Tears burned in her eyes. "I won't watch you die. Then help me live." He leaned his forehead against hers. "Help me find a way to win." Outside, the sun climbed higher, counting down the hours to a battle that would determine the fate of everyone Kade loved, including the woman who had become his entire world in the span of a single impossible night. Chapter 6. Healing wounds and breaking walls. Sera worked in silence, her hands steadied despite the chaos of the last hour. She'd cleaned and rebandaged Cade's wounds, stitched the worst of the tears with supplies from the emergency kit, and now sat watching him sleep fitfully on the cabin's single bed. The transformation had torn everything open again. Blood loss and silver poisoning had left him fevered, his body fighting battles on multiple fronts. Every few minutes he'd twitch or growl low in his throat, caught in dreams she could only imagine. Through the mate bond, still new, still strange, she could feel echoes of his pain. It was like phantom sensations, ghost touches of agony that made her own ribs ache in sympathy. "I don't know what I'm doing," she whispered to his unconscious form. "I'm a nurse, not a veterinarian. And you're not exactly either, are you? You're something in between. Something I don't have a textbook for." His hand twitched on the blanket. Without thinking, Sera covered it with her own. The moment their skin connected, something shifted. The mate bond flared bright and strong, and suddenly she wasn't just feeling echoes. She was in his mind, caught in the fever dream consuming him. A memory. Not a dream. 2 boys, identical, running through moonlit woods, laughing, brothers, friends. One tackles the other into a creek and they surface spluttering, shoving each other playfully. "I'll be your second," the one with ice blue eyes says. "When you become alpha, I'll stand beside you. Always." "Always," young Kade echoes, and they clasp forearms in a promise that feels sacred. The memory shifts. Years later, the brothers are grown now, standing before a crowd of wolves, some human, some in their animal forms. Their father, gray-haired and weary, addresses them both. "Kade will be alpha," he says, and Magnus's expression shutters closed. "But you will both lead together. You are stronger as one than divided." "Of course, father." Magnus's voice is smooth, controlled, but his eyes burn with something dark and bitter. Another shift. Nighttime. Teenage Kade walking alone through the forest. He doesn't hear the approach until it's too late. 3 wolves, no warning. They're on him before he can shift, silver claws raking across his shoulder. The pain is blinding. He catches a glimpse of ice-blue eyes watching from the shadows, waiting to see if he'll die. Magnus, his own brother. The final memory, their father's death. An accident during a hunt, they said. But Kade stands over the body and smells silver, sees the dart hidden in his father's neck, looks up to find Magnus watching him, daring him to speak the truth, and Kade says nothing. Because to accuse his twin without proof would tear the pack apart. Sera gasped and pulled her hand back, the connection severing. She was shaking, tears streaming down her face for the boy who'd been betrayed by his own blood, for the man who'd carried that betrayal alone for years. "I'm sorry," she whispered, pressing her palm to his fevered cheek. "I'm so sorry you've been alone." Kade's eyes opened, barely focused, gold-dimmed by pain and exhaustion. "Sera?" "I'm here." She smoothed his sweat-dampened hair back from his forehead. "You need to rest. Let your body heal. The challenge. 3 nights? I know. We'll figure it out. But right now you need sleep." His hand caught hers weakly. "You saw, didn't you? Through the bond." She nodded, not bothering to hide her tears. "Now you know what kind of family you're getting involved with." His laugh was bitter, broken. "Still want to stay?" "Kade." Sera leaned closer, making sure he could see her face, see the absolute certainty in her eyes. "Your brother is a monster. That doesn't make you one. You've spent years protecting a pack that doesn't even know what you've sacrificed for them. You've carried the weight of your father's murder alone because you valued peace over revenge. That's not weakness. That's not something to apologize for. He'll kill me." The words were barely a whisper. "In 3 nights, he'll kill me and then he'll take you. He'll hurt you just to punish me for choosing you over everything else. Then we make sure you win." Sera's voice turned hard with determination. "You said shifters can't lie, right? That you can smell deception?" "Yes, but then we use that. We expose what Magnus did. Make him confess in front of the pack." Kade shook his head weakly. "He's had years to perfect his lies. And without proof of father's murder, it's my word against his. So we find proof." Sera stood, pacing now, her nursing brain shifting into problem-solving mode. Where would he hide evidence? The dart, the silver, something that connects him to your father's death. His personal den, maybe. But it's in pack territory, surrounded by his loyalists. I can't. He tried to sit up and immediately went gray with pain. "You can't," Sera agreed, pushing him gently back down. "But I can." "Absolutely not. Kade, no." He grabbed her wrist with surprising strength. "You're not going anywhere near Magnus or his people." "I won't risk you. You don't have a choice." The words came out sharper than she intended. "You're in no condition to fight. Even with 3 days to heal, you'll be at half strength at best. Magnus will tear you apart, and then where does that leave me? Where does that leave your pack? I can't lose you." His voice broke on the words. "Sera, I just found you. The bond is new, unstable. If something happens to you, if he hurts you, I'll lose my mind. The wolf will take over completely. I'll be nothing but rage and violence." Sera softened, sinking back down beside him. "Then we do this smart. We plan. We don't rush in blind." She threaded her fingers through his. But I'm not sitting in this cabin while you face your brother alone. I'm your mate, your choice, remember? That means I get a say in how we fight this." Kade stared at her for a long moment, and she watched emotions war across his face, fear and pride, love and terror. "You're the strongest person I've ever met," he finally said, "and the most terrifying." "Good." She managed a weak smile. "Now tell me everything about pack law. If Magnus wants a formal challenge, there have to be rules. Loopholes. Something we can use." "There are rules," Kade admitted slowly. "The challenge must take place under the full moon, in the sacred circle. Both alphas fight in wolf form until one yields or dies. Can someone yield? In theory, but yielding means permanent exile from the pack. I'd lose my title, my family, everything. But you'd be alive. And Magnus would hunt us for the rest of our lives. An exiled alpha is seen as a threat. He'd never stop until I was dead." Sera absorbed this, her mind racing. "What about witnesses? Who oversees the challenge?" "The pack elders. 3 of them. They ensure the rules are followed, that the fight is fair. And if it's not fair, if Magnus cheats, then the challenge is void, and the elders can call for a new alpha to be chosen by the pack." Something sparked in Sera's mind. "So if we can prove Magnus has been breaking pack law, killing his own alpha father, trying to murder you outside of formal challenge, the elders could strip him of his right to challenge at all," Kade finished, understanding dawning in his eyes. "But we'd need irrefutable proof, and we'd need to present it before the full moon." "Then that's what we do." Sera squeezed his hand. "We find the proof, we expose Magnus, and we save your pack from a leader who's already proven he'll kill his own family for power." Kade pulled her down beside him, wrapping his arms around her despite his wounds. She could feel his heart racing against her cheek, feel the fever heat of his skin. "How did I get so lucky?" he murmured into her hair. "Lucky. You got shot with silver, betrayed by your brother, and saddled with a human mate who has no idea what she's doing." "Exactly." His arms tightened. "Lucky." They lay together in the quiet. The storm outside finally passed, sunlight struggling through the clouds. Sera could feel his exhaustion pulling him back toward sleep, could sense through the bond how much the conversation had cost him. "Rest now," she whispered. "I'll keep watch. Sera, When this is over, if we survive, I'm taking you somewhere without snow. Somewhere warm and safe where no one is trying to kill us." She smiled against his chest. "Is that a promise?" "It's a vow." His voice was already fading, sleep claiming him. "Mates for life, remember? That's a long time to make good on promises." Mates for life. The words should have terrified her. She'd known him for barely 48 hours. This was insane, impossible. Every rational part of her brain screamed warnings. But lying here in his arms, feeling his heartbeat sync with hers through the bond, Sera couldn't imagine being anywhere else. She'd spent 3 years building a life with a man who'd never truly seen her. Now she had 3 days to save a man who'd recognized her soul the moment their eyes met. Outside, afternoon sun glinted off snow. Somewhere in the forest, Magnus was planning his victory. But Sera Winters hadn't survived nursing school, bad relationships, and federal investigations by giving up when things got hard. She pressed a kiss to Kade's fevered temple and whispered a promise of her own. "We're going to win. And then I'm collecting on that tropical vacation." His lips quirked in a sleeping smile. The countdown had begun. Chapter 7. Dangerous Alliances. The morning sun filtered through the cabin windows, painting golden streaks across the wooden floor. Sera woke to find Kade already dressed, his expression tense as he studied a hand-drawn map spread across the kitchen table. "We need allies," he said without preamble when he noticed her stirring. "Magnus has spent years consolidating power, but not everyone in the pack supports him. There are those who remember what our father stood for." Sera joined him at the table, accepting the coffee he'd prepared. The map showed the pack's territory, marked with names and locations. "You want me to help you recruit them?" "I need you to do more than that." Kade's green eyes met hers, serious but trusting. "There's someone who might have evidence of Magnus's crimes, financial records, communications, something concrete we can present to the council. But she won't trust me. She'll only speak to someone outside pack politics. She'll speak to me, Sera realized, because I'm human. Because you're neutral ground. He circled a location on the map, a cottage on the northern edge of the territory. Elena was my father's advisor. After he died, she withdrew from pack affairs entirely. She knows things, Sera, but she's been too afraid to act. The thought of venturing into pack territory alone should have terrified her. 2 days ago it would have, but something had shifted during the night, in the sharing of memories and vulnerabilities. She wasn't just the human caught up in shifter politics anymore. She was part of this fight. What if Magnus has people watching her? He does. Kade's jaw tightened. That's why I can't go. My presence would alert them immediately. But a human woman taking a morning walk through the woods? That might go unnoticed long enough for you to make contact. Sera studied the map, tracing the route with her finger. It wasn't far, but the path wound through dense forest. You're asking me to trust that your pack won't hurt me. I'm asking you to trust yourself. He covered her hand with his, the warmth of his touch grounding her. You're stronger than you know, Sera, and you're not going in completely alone. I'll be tracking you from a distance, close enough to intervene if necessary, but far enough to avoid detection. The plan was dangerous, but so was doing nothing. They had 5 days until the full moon, 5 days to build a case strong enough to challenge Magnus's authority. Every hour they delayed, his brother consolidated more power. Tell me about Elena, Sera said, committing the map's details to memory. What should I expect? Kade's expression softened slightly. She's cautious but fair. She loved my father like a brother and mourned him deeply. When Magnus took over, she tried to speak out against his methods, but he isolated her, spread rumors about her mental state. The pack thinks she's a grieving old woman who can't accept change. But you think she knows the truth about what happened? I know she does. His voice carried absolute certainty. The night my father died, Elena was with him. She was the one who found his body. The official story was a challenge gone wrong, a younger wolf seeking to prove himself. But Elena saw something that night, something that didn't align with Magnus's version of events. Sera felt the weight of what he was asking settle over her. This wasn't just about gathering evidence. It was about giving voice to a woman who'd been silenced by fear and isolation. I'll go, she said firmly, but I need you to promise me something. Anything. If this goes wrong, if Magnus catches me, you don't do something reckless trying to save me. We see this through together, or not at all. A ghost of a smile touched Kade's lips. You realize you're asking an alpha shifter to ignore every instinct he has? I'm asking my partner to trust me the way I'm trusting him. The word partner hung between them, heavy with implications neither was quite ready to fully acknowledge. But Kade nodded, accepting her terms even as she could see the struggle it caused him. They spent the next hour preparing. Kade gave her a small device that looked like an ordinary fitness tracker, but contained a distress beacon. Press and hold for 3 seconds, he instructed. I'll be there before you can count to 10. He also taught her basic pack etiquette, how to approach Elena's cottage without causing alarm, the proper way to request an audience, phrases in the old language that would identify her as someone under Kade's protection. Sera absorbed it all, her mind sharp and focused despite the nervous energy thrumming through her veins. One more thing, Kade said as they prepared to leave. He pulled a silver pendant from his pocket, a wolf's head wrought in intricate detail. This was my mother's. Wear it, and Elena will know you come with my blessing. The metal was warm as Sera fastened it around her neck, and she could have sworn she felt a pulse of energy as it settled against her skin. Kade's eyes tracked the movement, something fierce and protective flashing in their depths. Be careful, he said softly, pulling her close. His forehead rested against hers, their breaths mingling in the narrow space between them. Come back to me. Always, Sera promised, and meant it with every fiber of her being. The forest was different in daylight, less menacing but no less wild. Sera moved carefully along the path Kade had shown her, aware of every sound, every shift in the air. She could feel him somewhere behind her, a constant presence that both comforted and motivated her. Elena's cottage appeared after 20 minutes of walking, a small stone structure nestled between towering pines. Smoke curled from the chimney, and herbs hung drying from the eaves. It looked peaceful, almost idyllic, except for the subtle signs of surveillance, disturbed earth near the tree line, the strategic placement of the cottage where it could be watched from multiple angles. Sera approached slowly, her hand hovering near the distress beacon, even as she forced herself to appear calm. She knocked 3 times on the weathered door, then stepped back, waiting. The woman who answered was smaller than Sera expected, with silver-streaked dark hair and eyes that assessed her with sharp intelligence. "You're the human," Elena said without preamble. "The one who saved Kade from the hunters." "My name is Sera." She touched the pendant at her throat. "Kade sent me. He said you might be willing to talk." Elena's gaze lingered on the pendant, emotions flickering across her weathered face. Grief, nostalgia, and something that might have been hope. "Did he now?" She glanced past Sera toward the forest, scanning for watchers. "And what makes him think I have anything worth saying after all these years of silence?" "Because silence is its own kind of testimony," Sera replied, remembering Kade's words. "And because time is running out for the truth to matter." For a long moment, Elena studied her, weighing risks and possibilities. Then she stepped aside, opening the door wider. "Come in quickly," she said, "and pray that my watchers are as inattentive as I hope they are." Chapter 8. The Weight of Truth. Elena's cottage was warm and cluttered, every surface covered with books, dried herbs, and trinkets that spoke of a long life lived close to nature. The older woman bolted the door behind them and drew the curtains with practiced efficiency. "Sit," she commanded, gesturing to a worn armchair near the fireplace, "and tell me exactly what Kade thinks I can do for him after all this time." Sera settled into the chair, acutely aware of the pendant's weight against her chest. "He believes you know the truth about his father's death. That Magnus's story doesn't match what you witnessed." Elena's hand stilled as she poured tea from a kettle hanging over the fire. "Belief and proof are different things, child. In pack law, they might as well be worlds apart. But you do know something." It wasn't a question. The older woman handed Sera a cup, then sank into the chair opposite her. For a long moment, she simply stared into the flames, memories playing across her weathered features. "I loved Thomas like family. He was the finest alpha I ever served, strong but fair, traditional yet willing to adapt. When he died, something vital died in this pack. What happened that night?" Elena's fingers tightened around her cup. "The official story is that a young wolf named Derek challenged Thomas for leadership. They fought according to tradition, and Thomas fell. Derek was then killed by Magnus in righteous fury, avenging his father's death." She looked up, meeting Sera's eyes. "But Derek was barely more than a boy, recently turned, with no standing to issue a formal challenge. And I saw his body afterward. The wounds weren't from a fair fight." Sera's heart raced. "What kind of wounds?" "Silver." The word fell like a stone between them. Someone had silver dust in Derek's claws, enough to weaken Thomas during the fight, but not enough to be immediately obvious. By the time I examined Derek's body, someone had cleaned most of it away, but traces remained. Magnus poisoned the challenge." Sera breathed, the implications cascading through her mind. "He set up both his father and Derek to die." "I can't prove it." Elena's voice cracked with old pain. "I tried to speak up at first, to demand an investigation. But Magnus was grieving, seemingly devastated by his father's death. When I persisted, he suggested my judgment was clouded by emotion. Others in the pack began to question my stability, my age. Within weeks, I'd been effectively exiled to this cottage, labeled as a grief-stricken old woman who couldn't accept reality. The bitterness in her words was palpable. Sera thought of Kade, carrying the weight of this knowledge alone for years, unable to act without proof. "But you kept records, documentation." Elena studied her carefully. "What makes you so certain?" "Because someone like you, someone who served an alpha built on tradition and justice, wouldn't let the truth disappear completely. You'd preserve it, hide it, wait for the right moment." Sera leaned forward. "And because Kade believes in you enough to send me here, knowing the risk." A small smile ghosted across Elena's face. "He's more like Thomas than he knows." She rose slowly, moving to a bookshelf in the corner. Her fingers traced along the spines until she found what she sought, a leather journal, its pages yellowed with age. "I kept this hidden for 7 years," Elena said, returning to her chair. "My observations from that night, sketches of Derek's wounds, copies of PAC financial records showing unusual payments to Derek in the weeks before the challenge. Nothing that would stand alone as proof, but together." She pressed the journal into Sera's hands. "Together, it paints a picture." Sera opened the journal carefully, scanning the detailed notes. Elena's handwriting was precise, clinical even, as she described wound patterns, angles of attack, the suspicious timing of events. There were also names, PAC members who'd expressed private doubts about the official story, witnesses whose testimonies had been dismissed or altered. "This is exactly what we need," Sera said, her mind already racing ahead. "With this, Kade can demand a formal inquiry before the council. They'd have to investigate if Magnus allows them to see it." Elena's tone turned sharp. "That journal is my death warrant if it's discovered. And yours too, now that you've touched it. Magnus has eyes everywhere, including PAC members who report directly to him." As if summoned by the mention of danger, Sera felt a prickle of awareness at the back of her neck. Through the window she caught movement, a figure passing between the trees, too deliberate to be coincidental. "Someone's coming," she whispered. Elena cursed softly. "Hide the journal, now." Sera tucked it inside her jacket just as heavy footsteps sounded on the porch. The knock that followed was aggressive, demanding. "Elena," a male voice called. "Open up. Magnus wants to know why you have a visitor." The older woman shot Sera a warning glance before moving to the door. "I'm entitled to occasional company, Garrett. Since when does the Alpha monitor my social calls? Since the company is the human who's been harboring his traitor brother." The door rattled as Garrett tested the lock. "Let me in, or I'll assume you're conspiring against PAC interests." Sera's hand moved to the distress beacon, but Elena shook her head minutely. Triggering it would bring Kade running, and potentially into a trap. They needed another way. "I was just leaving," Sera called out, forcing her voice to remain steady. She moved to the door, Elena's hand briefly squeezing her arm in warning or encouragement or both. When Elena unbolted the door, Sera found herself face to face with a shifter in his prime. Tall, muscular, with cold eyes that assessed her as both threat and prey. 2 others flanked him, their postures aggressive. "Taking a walk through our territory?" Garrett asked, his tone mocking. "Dangerous hobby for a human." "I was lost," Sera replied, meeting his gaze despite her racing heart. Elena was kind enough to offer directions and tea. "I'll be going now." "Not so fast." Garrett's hand shot out, gripping her arm hard enough to bruise. "Magnus will want to question you himself. Make sure your intentions are as innocent as you claim." Through their bond, that strange, growing connection that transcended explanation, Sera felt Kade's sudden surge of alarm. He knew she was in danger, and she knew with absolute certainty that if Garrett took her to Magnus, everything would unravel before they had a chance to act. Chapter 9. Breaking point Sera's mind raced as Garrett's grip tightened on her arm. The journal pressed against her ribs beneath her jacket, evidence that could either save Kade or condemn them both. Through their connection, she felt his presence drawing closer, felt his barely controlled rage at seeing her threatened. "Stay back," she thought desperately, hoping somehow he could sense her intent. "Not yet. Trust me." "There's no need for dramatics," Elena interjected smoothly, stepping between them. The girl wandered into PAC territory by accident. "I was simply being hospitable, as Thomas taught us." Garrett's eyes narrowed at the mention of the former Alpha. "Thomas is dead. Magnus leads now, and he has different ideas about hospitality, especially toward humans who seduce his brother into treason." "Seduce?" Sera couldn't keep the incredulity from her voice. "Is that what Magnus is telling people? That I'm some kind of manipulator? Aren't you?" Garrett yanked her forward, close enough that she could smell the wildness on him. Earth and pine and something predatory. "Kade was loyal until you appeared. Now he's chosen exile over family. What would you call that?" "I'd call it a man making his own choices." Sera refused to flinch, even as fear hammered through her veins. Maybe Magnus should ask himself why his brother would rather live in exile than serve under his leadership. The slap came fast, snapping her head to the side. Pain exploded across her cheek, bright and sharp. She heard Elena's gasp, felt the forest itself seem to hold its breath. And through their bond, she felt Kade's control shatter. He was coming. Nothing would stop him now. You don't speak about the Alpha that way, Garrett snarled. Human or not, you'll show respect. His words cut off as a roar split the air, primal, furious, and absolutely terrifying. The shifters turned toward the sound, their bodies tensing in instinctive response to a dominance challenge they couldn't ignore. Kade burst from the tree line in his wolf form, massive and silver-gray, his green eyes blazing with protective rage. He was magnificent and deadly, every line of his body radiating lethal intent. Garrett released Sera immediately, pushing her behind him as he and his companions shifted. The transformation was fluid, horrifyingly fast, human forms melting into wolves in heartbeats. But even in their animal forms, they were smaller than Kade, and the wariness in their postures showed they knew it. "Stand down, Kade," Garrett growled, his voice rough in his shifted form. "You're on Packlands without permission. That's a death sentence." Kade prowled forward, placing himself between Sera and the other wolves. His message was clear. To reach her, they'd have to go through him. Elena grabbed Sera's wrist, pulling her back toward the cottage. "Inside. Now. I won't leave him. You'll leave him to fight without worrying about protecting you." Elena's grip was surprisingly strong. "That's how you help him. Give him one less thing to defend." The logic cut through Sera's panic. She let Elena pull her back, but her eyes never left Kade as the standoff escalated. One of Garrett's companions lunged, testing Kade's defenses. The silver wolf moved with devastating speed, catching the attacker mid-leap and slamming him to the ground with crushing force. The yelp of pain was immediate, the smaller wolf scrambling back with his tail tucked. "He's stronger than all of us," Elena murmured from the doorway. "True alpha blood. If Magnus weren't playing politics, Kade would be the obvious choice to lead. Then why isn't he challenging Magnus directly? Because pack law requires proof of wrongdoing before such a challenge can be issued. Without evidence, it would be seen as a power grab motivated by jealousy or ambition. Kade would lose support even from those who might otherwise back him. Sera's hand moved to the journal beneath her jacket. They had the evidence now, but first, they had to survive long enough to use it. The fight erupted in earnest as Garrett and his remaining companion attacked in tandem. Kade moved like liquid violence, his larger size offset by the coordinated assault. Teeth flashed, claws raked, and the sound of snarling filled the clearing. Through their bond, Sera felt every impact, every flash of pain. It was disorienting, terrifying, but it also gave her insight into the fight's rhythm. She could sense when Kade was about to dodge, when he planned to counter, when exhaustion began to creep into his movements, and she felt the exact moment when more wolves appeared at the tree line. "Elena," she breathed. "More are coming," the older woman cursed. "Magnus's enforcers. Garrett must have called for backup before approaching the cottage." She met Sera's eyes, her expression grim. "You need to run. Take the journal and go. There's a path behind the cottage that leads to neutral territory, land not claimed by any pack. I'm not leaving Kade. If they capture you both, everything we've worked for is lost. The journal, the truth, all of it dies with you." Elena pressed something into Sera's hand, a small vial filled with dark liquid. "Wolfsbane tincture. Not enough to kill, but enough to slow them down if you need to create distance. Now go, before—" The cottage door exploded inward, torn from its hinges by a massive dark wolf. Magnus. Even in wolf form, he radiated authority and barely controlled violence. His amber eyes fixed on Sera with predatory focus, and she understood with sudden clarity why Kade feared his brother. This wasn't just a political rival or ambitious sibling. This was a killer who'd already murdered his own father and framed an innocent wolf to cover his tracks. Elena stepped in front of Sera, her body language protective despite her human fragility. "Magnus," This doesn't concern... The dark wolf's paw lashed out, catching Elena across the chest and sending her crashing into the bookshelf. She crumpled, gasping, blood blooming across her shirt. No! Sera dropped to her knees beside the older woman, her hands pressing against the wound. The claws had gone deep, too deep. Elena's breathing was labored, wet-sounding. Through the doorway, she could see Kade fighting desperately to reach her. But he was surrounded now, 5 wolves working in concert to bring him down. She felt his desperation, his fury, his grief, and beneath it all, a wild, reckless plan forming. He was going to shift back, make himself vulnerable, to try to talk his way out of this. To trade his life for hers? No, Sera thought fiercely. We survive this together or not at all. Chapter 10. Awakening time seemed to fracture into crystalline shards as Sera knelt beside Elena, Magnus's massive form looming over them both. The dark wolf's lips pulled back in a snarl, revealing teeth designed to tear and rend. Outside, Kade's desperate howl split the air, a sound of anguish that resonated through every cell of Sera's body. The bond between them flared suddenly, searingly bright. Not just emotion now, but something deeper. Energy, essence, a connection that transcended the physical. And in that moment of crisis, something inside Sera that had always been dormant, always been waiting, finally awakened. The pendant at her throat burned hot against her skin. Interesting, Magnus growled, his shifted voice rough and guttural. He stepped closer, his attention fixing on the silver wolf's head hanging from her neck. That belonged to Catherine, Kade's mother. Tell me, little human, what makes you think you're worthy to wear it? Sera's hands pressed harder against Elena's wound, but her eyes never left Magnus. Through the pendant, through the bond, she felt something ancient stirring, a recognition that sang in her blood like a forgotten song suddenly remembered. I think, she said slowly, her voice steadier than she felt, that you're afraid of what I represent. Magnus's laugh was sharp, cruel. I fear nothing, least of all a fragile human who's bewitched my fool of a brother. Then why send 5 wolves to contain him? Why come yourself instead of sending more enforcers? Sera felt the words rising from somewhere deep, instinctive. You feel it too, don't you? The way the pack bond responds to us. The way your wolves hesitate, it was true. Through the doorway, she could see the attacking wolves' movements had grown uncertain. They still surrounded Kade, but their postures had shifted. Less aggressive, more confused. As if some fundamental aspect of their pack hierarchy had suddenly become unclear. You know nothing about pack bonds, Magnus snarled, but his amber eyes held a flicker of something that might have been doubt. Elena's hand gripped Sera's wrist weakly. The pendant, she gasped. Catherine was... Enough. Magnus moved with terrifying speed, his massive paw raised to strike again. Sera acted on pure instinct. She grabbed the vial Elena had given her, wolfsbane tincture, and hurled it directly at Magnus's face. The glass shattered against his muzzle, the dark liquid splashing across his eyes and nose. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Magnus reeled back with a howl of pain and rage, pawing at his face as the wolfsbane burned. It wouldn't kill him, but it bought precious seconds. Sera grabbed Elena under the arms and dragged her toward the back of the cottage, away from the enraged Alpha. The path, Elena wheezed, behind the woodpile. Take the journal. Tell Kade. Tell him Catherine's secret. I'm not leaving you. You must. Elena's eyes were fierce despite her weakening state. The pendant chose you. That means something. Trust it. Outside, the temporary chaos Sera had created was already resolving. She heard Magnus's furious roar, heard the other wolves responding to their alpha's command. They'd be on her in moments. Through the bond, she felt Kade's desperate surge of strength as he fought to break free, to reach her. The connection between them pulsed with urgency, with unspoken promises, with something that felt terrifyingly close to love. Too soon. Too intense, but undeniable in its truth. Run. His thought came through clearly for the first time, writing the bond like a spoken word. Please, Sera. Live. She stumbled out the back door, the journal clutched against her chest, Elena's words echoing in her mind. The forest loomed before her, ancient, wild, and suddenly welcoming in a way that made no rational sense. The path Elena had mentioned was barely visible, just a break in the undergrowth that might have been animal trail, or might have been something more deliberate. Sera ran. Behind her, she heard the cottage being torn apart, heard Magnus's furious commands, heard the sound of pursuit beginning. But something strange was happening as she plunged deeper into the forest. The trees seemed to bend toward her, branches shifting to create clearer passage. The path grew more defined beneath her feet, as if the forest itself was guiding her. The pendant at her throat pulsed with warmth, steady as a heartbeat. She didn't know how long she ran, minutes or hours, time losing meaning in the desperate flight. Her lungs burned, her legs screamed in protest, but she pushed forward, driven by survival instinct and something else. A pull, a certainty that if she could just reach. The forest opened suddenly onto a clearing she'd never seen before. In its center stood a circle of ancient stones, weathered and moss-covered, arranged in a pattern that spoke of ritual and purpose. The air here felt different, charged, liminal, as if this place existed slightly outside normal reality. Sera staggered into the circle and collapsed, gasping. The journal tumbled from her grip, landing open on pages filled with Elena's careful documentation. But her eyes were drawn to a different entry, one near the end, written in shaking script. Catherine wasn't just Kade's mother. She was something older, something the pack had forgotten. A bridgewalker, they called her kind, human and wolf both, neither and more. The pendant was her anchor, her connection to both worlds. When she died, that knowledge died with her, or so Magnus thought. Sera's hand went to the pendant, understanding crashing over her like a wave. The bond with Kade, her inexplicable comfort in the forest, the way pack wolves hesitated around her, the pendant's choice to warm at her touch. She wasn't just human, or she wasn't entirely human anymore. Perhaps had never been. Some dormant heritage finally awakened by proximity to shifter magic, by the bond with Kade, by this place of power. The sound of approaching wolves pulled her from her revelation. They'd tracked her to the clearing, but as they reached its edge, they stopped. Magnus emerged from the tree line in human form now, naked and bloody from the fight, his face still raw from the wolfsbane burns. "Clever girl," he said, his voice cold fury, running to sacred ground. "But that won't save you. These stones haven't held power in generations." Sera struggled to her feet, clutching the pendant. Elena's journal documents everything. The silver in Derek's claws, the financial payments, your father's murder. She raised her voice, addressing the wolves who'd followed Magnus. "He's not your rightful alpha. He's a kinslayer and a liar. Bold words from a human trespassing on packlands? I'm not..." Sera started, then stopped. What was she? The question hung unanswered. A familiar presence entered the clearing, and her heart leaped. Kade limped into view, bloodied but alive, his human form marked with rapidly healing wounds. His eyes found hers across the distance, and the relief in them was palpable. "It's over, Magnus," Kade said quietly. "She has the proof. The council will investigate. Your reign ends here." Magnus's laugh was sharp, brittle. "You think they'll believe an exiled wolf and his human whore? You think you can walk into council chambers and..." "I think," Sera interrupted, her voice carrying a resonance that surprised even her, "that they'll listen to a bridgewalker wearing Catherine's pendant. To someone who carries proof of your crimes and the blood right to demand justice." The clearing went silent. Every wolf present stared at her, recognition and impossibility warring in their expressions. Magnus's face drained of color. "You're bluffing," he whispered. "Bridgewalkers are extinct," Sera smiled, feeling the truth of it in her bones. "Then I suppose I'm a ghost. And ghosts have a way of revealing buried secrets.